Real quick before we get started, we got something really cool that we want to tell you about. Legendary Magic artist Mark Poole just launched the Mark Poole playmat collection over on Kickstarter. The campaign features art from some of Poole's most iconic work, like Birds of Paradise and Counterspell and Library of Alexandria too. And all of the artwork has been extended to fit the dimensions of the playmat, which adds a lot to the piece. The campaign ends on March 10th, so use our link in the description below to check out the Mark Poole playmat collection before it's too late. Now let's get into this episode.
This is what I sound like. Welcome to This Is It. How about you? What do you sound like?
I'm way happier with my beanie choice this week as opposed to last week, as opposed.
However, I'm also realizing that it's like the same color as our background.
Oh, yeah. Where'd your hair product go?
I still haven't picked
Still
it up.
haven't got it? Why
no,
not?
I haven't.
It's at the salon?
Yeah, it's at the salon.
That's
yeah.
walking distance from
That's
you.
walking distance from us, yeah.
Yeah. Go get it.
It's so cold and snowy.
Ready?
Let's do this.
This podcast is brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. Use code PLAY2WIN5 at the affiliate link down below for 5% off to help support. This podcast is brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. No, it's all gone. The magic is gone. I don't know what I'm doing.
This is a good omen.
This podcast is brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. Use code PLAY2WIN5 at the affiliate link down below for 5% off to help support the show.
Welcome to the Play to Win podcast, where we talk about winning in cEDH. I'm Cam.
And I'm Dylan. This week we are talking about Turbo in cEDH. What is it? What's expected of it? What are the decks that do it? All about Turbo in cEDH.
We're trying to go fast because that's what we think we should be doing in cEDH now. So I just kind of want to talk about fast decks.
You like Etali, I like Rograkh, we like fast decks. These are Turbo decks. We're going to talk about those a lot today. What is Turbo? Let's start at the very top. What is Turbo?
This is a question we've been asking ourselves philosophically for quite a while now.
Realistically, I think, and I'm not really sure why the term Turbo got coined in cEDH in the first place. I don't know where it comes from. Maybe somebody knows below. But I think what it really is aggro. That's what it means. It's the word that we used in other Magic the Gathering formats to describe very fast decks. They're aggro decks. But normally, aggro decks in other formats are associated with decks that are winning with combat damage and are attacking with creatures quickly. Not always, but I feel like that's kind of the assumption when you talk about an aggro deck, which is kind of different from what the Turbo decks in cEDH are doing, because they are combo decks and they're winning very quickly. But you can't really call them combo decks because all the decks in cEDH are combo decks.
That's the thing. Yeah, they all have to end the game some way, and it's not going to be by dealing 120 damage.
So you can't really call them combo decks either. So I think Turbo is just like a way to describe what is specifically like aggro in cEDH. Just decks that are trying to win, in my opinion, decks that are trying to win on turn 2, that's a Turbo deck. If you can win on turn 1, that's great. If you're winning on turn 3, normally that would be considered slow for what your deck is trying to do. Obviously, all the pods are dependent, and some Turbo decks can win on turn 5 and whatever, but that would be like the goal, is like where I would like set the bars. Like if you are winning on turn 2 or you're trying to, that is like what a Turbo deck is.
Or I would at least say like, yeah, you're averaging turn 2 to turn 3 wins. Like if you're not winning on turn 2, then you're trying to win on turn 3 more protected than what your push was on turn 2.
Right, yeah, like an initial push on turn 2. Sometimes this could look like Necropotence or one Etali. And rather than winning the game, you get a whole bunch of value and then you can push again on turn 3.
The threshold for what's not a Turbo deck is that your fastest win is if you go land, fastest Oracle, Demonic Consultation.
Yeah.
Obviously, like with like Lotus Petal and other fast mana, like you can assemble that way quicker. But like if on average, that's your rate that you would be able to do that, or you're not doing that till way later in the game, like that's where you are out of the Turbo region. If you're not always reasonably putting that win on the stack on turn 2, I don't think you should be considered a Turbo deck.
Right, yeah. And I think mostly if you're winning on turn 3, that would just be like cEDH decks. A lot of cEDH decks can put a win together on turn 3. They may not necessarily go for it. Maybe they would go for, a situation that puts them in a spot where they can't really lose, or they'll make 50 mana or whatever, do something like that. But I would say most mid-range cEDH decks have the ability to win on turn 3, but they also can win on turn 4, turn 5, turn 6.
Protected. Right. Exactly. Yeah. The same way that Turbo can win later in the game.
Right.
More protected, or at least not like later in the game, but more mid points of the game, a little bit more protected. They're able to win the game later, more protected.
The mid-range decks,
The mid-range decks, yeah.
Yeah, should we talk about some specific examples, what we think are the current Turbo decks of the meta in 2026?
Yeah, and we should rank them in some kind of a way. Do you want to rank them faster than each other? Or do you want to rank them as like, no, this deck's just better than this other Turbo deck?
It's tough when you talk about faster because I feel like it's arranged. You know what I mean? All of the decks that we're going to talk about can win on turn 1. They usually win on turn 2. They can win protected on turn 3. But some of them do it more, and I don't really have the exact stats on which one ones can pull off the turn 1 a little bit more than the others. So fastest seems harder for me.
So we should rank them based on vibe then, and how much better we think they are. Yeah,
how much we like them, and how much we're afraid to see them at tournaments, how much we're afraid to see them in other pods. Overall power, but really vibe is how I'm gonna be rating them.
It's hard to say which one of these is faster when they all could present like a turn 1 win realistically. And I think it's time to also put like the nail in the coffin and say this is not a turbo deck. This is a turbo deck. Things that like would make me think that they're turbo, but they might not actually be because of certain aspects of the deck that maybe we'll talk about.
Yeah, and everything is of course an asterisk. You know what I mean? Like the commander only represents an idea of what the deck could be. You can build Tymna Grom to be an all-in turbo deck and not use Tymna or Crom at all. You can do that. You can build Tymna Grom to be a mid-range deck, and then we wouldn't talk about it. Obviously, ranges and what you can do with cEDH decks, and that's one of the reasons why they're cool. But we're going to be, I think, talking about like the most seen versions of these decks.
Well, I guess that's the first one I want to start off with is Tymna Grom. Is this considered a turbo deck, or would you consider this a mid-range deck?
Depends on the list. I think you could build Tymna Grom realistically to have 25 lands and go all in on turn 1 Necro, and that's your deck. It's a Terra deck, but with white instead of green. It's a Rograkh deck, but with Suvin's Reclamation and Silence, and that's it. You could go that route, and it would be probably a great deck. You could also go the route like that, except like a little bit slower, and you play some value. You're more of like a Rhystic Study deck, which I think is the most common one. You have the ability to kind of explode sometimes, but you're technically not the best ad nauseum deck, and you'd rather Rhystic on turn 1 most of the time. That's to me where I see Blue Farm most of the time, which is not a turbo.
Because we've been in the mid-range hell meta for like 2 years at this point. Really not been the best option for them to be turbo in the meta.
Right, but if things continue to shift a little bit and decks like that we're going to talk about more like Ral and Etali and Rograkh continue to do well, then maybe Blue Farm will adapt and there will be more winning lists that are all in on the turbo fashion, and you're just a turbo Necro, turbo Adnaz deck with Silence and Savine's Reclamation, and then also Tymna and Crom are there. You don't plan to use them at all. Is it a turbo deck? The answer truly is depends. I don't know.
We're going to stamp it maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe
I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you? You actually play Blue Farm. What are your thoughts on is it a turbo deck or not?
Yeah, I have games where it feels like it's a pretty good turbo deck, and I have games where it feels like I'm never going to win on turn 2 like ever. I think most of the time it ends up not feeling like a turbo deck, at least from the way that I built it. Like the other night I did get a turn 3 Necropotence win, but it was a pretty fucking lucky Necropotence win.
Did you play Necro on turn 2?
I played it on turn 3, but I also pushed on turn 3 with like 32 life.
You had like extra mana and shit already.
I had a bunch of mana, and I was like, I'm sure in 28 cards I'll find something, and I did. Yeah, because it's a great deck.
So even then, like, is that turbo to me? Because that feels like turbo, but turn 3 to me, I consider turn 3 you've made it to the mid game. Do you remember were you seat 1 or not? Did it?
I was seat 1. Yeah.
So like seat 1 of turn 3 is still almost turn 2. So that's fast. Like I'm not saying it's
fast.
Not.
Yeah, exactly. But like it's not necessarily geared up to be every single game. Like if you play Necropotence and Dark Ritual in the same deck, sometimes you'll find both of those cards in your opening hand. But that doesn't mean that like you're a turbo deck when that happens. Like your whole deck could still be built, you know, like a Thrasios Tymna deck, which is not a turbo deck because they don't consistently put wins together on turn 2.
One more thing before I get into what I'm going to say. Your hair peeked through a little bit on the bottom, on the top of your beanie. I think do a tuck maybe.
I had an itch.
You had an itch, and I don't want you to see it later and go, oh, why is that little tusks of hair
there? Yeah.
As I'm talking about this, I'm kind of locking my decision that Tymna Grom is maybe not a turbo deck.
They don't partake in the turbo aspect of the deck. Yeah, but neither does Terra. I guess Terra kind of does, but in
Terra feeds Breach a little bit.
In the best case scenario, you're not casting Terra.
Right, yeah. And honestly, I don't know that I would consider Terra a turbo deck. I do think it's like fast mid-range deck. That's at the end, that's how I was playing it. I took Terra apart. I don't know if I officially announced.
We did say that last week.
Whatever. Yeah, so I don't even know if I would consider Terra a turbo deck. All of the decks that I can classify as turbo are faster than it. Should we talk about some of the other ones?
Yeah, we should talk about a good option, or at least a good example of a turbo deck.
Because to me, I feel like in order for me to talk about turbo, I have to, like, we've already referenced them a little bit. Like, I have to kind of like let everyone know what my pool of cards, like, commanders are talking about.
It was dumb to start with Tymna Grom. Let's start with Rograkh Silas. Really,
because Rograkh Silas is the deck that I play that I think is a turbo deck, because I think this deck can win on turn 2 pretty easily. early.
Yeah.
I won on turn 1 the other night at locals. It was great.
Great. So for the debate, I'll take the opposition of it's not a turbo deck. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Do you think it's not a turbo deck? What are your thoughts?
It totally is.
It's a turbo deck. Yeah. I guess the main thing that Rograkh has, where that the other turbo decks that we're going to talk about today don't really have, is Rograkh has access to counter spells, or at least normally the winning lists play a few more counter spells than most of the other turbo decks play. Some of the other turbo decks like Rograkh, who can play blue cards, they just, from what I see, don't play a ton of them.
Yeah, because I think part of being a turbo deck is that you have to dedicate so many slots to making sure that you're able to win the game as quickly as possible, which means that you don't always have room for interaction. And I think that this is also where like a lot of non-blue decks tend to shine too, is because they don't have access to the two best card advantage engines in the game, which is Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study, and because they don't have access to consistent protection in free counter magic all the time, it doesn't make sense for them to like push to the long game as frequently. It makes more sense for these non-blue decks to push turbo and go a little bit faster instead.
And we should, since we're talking about them all right now, we haven't actually spoken of the one turbo deck that's non-blue yet. So since you're talking about the power of the non-blue, Etali is obviously the other big one that is, I think everyone's looking at as like a turbo deck that doesn't use blue cards, that doesn't need to protect itself, that just goes way over the top on turn 2.
Yeah, I think these are the two most prominent cEDH decks right now. And Etali, like you said, is one of those examples of a deck that can't really protect itself and is so much more interested in going fast than protecting itself because it can just go again, which is another aspect of turbo decks, is that if you tend to get stopped on your turn 2, which does happen, you know, people are aware of what your game plan is a lot of the time. There are ways for you to recover so that way it's not completely devastating in game ruining if you do get stopped.
And you do play some interaction. Like as Etali, you do play Pyroblast and Elemental Blast. You're going to put in Hexing Squelcher.
I'm putting in Hexing Squelcher as well.
Yeah, there's Deflecting Swap, but that only kind of, if Etali's already in play, like, you know.
Sometimes, yeah. And like Deflecting Swap's not good against Mindbreak Trap when after Etali too, because I don't have 4 other targets. I can really only protect one of the other things that's on the stack that I'm getting with Etali.
A Deflecting Swap with Mindbreak Trap means that you have to redeflect all of the targets of Mindbreak Trap. So if Mindbreak Trap targeted 4 things, Deflecting Swat has to target 4 things. One of those things can be the Deflecting Swat.
One of those things can be the Deflecting Swat, but so, now it still needs to be 3 of the 4 other things that are on the stack.
The reason why I was bringing all this shit in the beginning with is Rograkh actually does get to play counter spells. Rograkh gets to play Force of Will and Pact of Negation and a whole bunch of other shit as well. That would be like the main difference that I see between other turbo decks, that Rograkh actively plays a lot of those counter spells.
Just thought I haven't made this cut yet, but I think I might take out Redirect Lightning for Vexing Shusher. Why do I say Vexing Shusher all the time when I'm talking about
Hexing Squelcher?
Hexing Squelcher, yeah.
Take out Redirect Lightning. Yeah, sure. Redirect Lightning probably
because I had Redirect Lightning in there mostly so I could redirect a bounce spell to a Vexing Bobble, and now I could just do this instead.
Yeah, this seems better.
Okay, great. Side tangent over. Let's go back to talking about Etali.
Honestly, one of the best things that Hexing Squelcher does for Etali specifically is it lets you play through opponents' Vexing Bobbles, which is like one of the things that you really don't want to see. So I think it's great for that reason.
I was thinking about taking out Nature's Claim because it's there for like Vexing Bobble, but like I still like it as like a silence basically against the Rhystic Studies too. So so like there is interaction. Clearly we're talking about way other like interactive spells that Etali has access to, but it's not part of the main game plan. I'm much more likely to dump my interaction to a Lion's Eye Diamond if it means casting a quicker Etali as opposed to a more protected Etali.
That is kind of like the struggle that I'll have sometimes with Rograkh of like, you have the protection in your hand, but it's often like, I don't think it's better to wait a turn to have a protected win if you're in the super early game. Once you've made it to turn 5, then yes, that could be a big difference. Because if you just go for a win on turn 5, that's not resolving. But if you can wait until turn 6 and have some protection, that's a fair argument. But if you're on turn 1 and you're like, I can put this Ad Nauseam on the stack on turn 1, or I can wait till turn 2 and hold up a Swan Song for the Ad Nauseam, I'm going to cast Ad Nauseam on turn 1.
I'm trying to do it as early as possible.
Right?
Yeah.
Less chances for your opponent to play a land in play, to be able to draw a card for turn, to have another piece of interaction.
That's kind of the problem with it. Yeah. So like even if like someone shows that they have interaction for you, it's never going to get better for you to try to push later just because now that one person has interaction now and maybe not later. Someone else is going to have the opportunity to draw something else and their engines are going to be able to go off. They're going to be able to put a win together because they have extra protection that wasn't getting used to politic against you either.
I feel like you do have a little bit of an advantage as like a turbo player with the politics because all you do is win. So you make everyone else have to make tough decisions all the time. Because if they say like, hey, if I counter your spell, I'm just going to lose right away to this other player, you can kind of say, okay, then you're going to lose the game. That doesn't sound good for you. Don't do that.
Yeah. Honestly, like the fewer decisions you have when you can like maximize the impact of each decision, the better it is. Because I have less opportunities to fuck up myself because there's less overall decisions decisions I have to make. And
Yeah.
the more decisions there are, the more times I have a chance of fucking up that decision.
That's kind of true, I guess.
Right? So if I have one decision is cast Etali, like that's all I need to do. I
Yeah.
only need like 6 brain cells to do that. But
Seven.
then 7. You're right. I need 7 brain cells to do this. 6 is an awkward number. Yeah. But like then all of a sudden though, you get to unlock the rest of your brain cells when you flip over like Gifts Ungiven, Intuition, and Wishclaw Talisman in the same pile or some shit.
Etali does have a weird thing where you have to build your deck as if it had all of the cards in everyone else's deck, sort of, right?
It is a very fun like deck building challenge. Like how do I build this deck that doesn't play Tainted Pact in a way that I can play Tainted Pact?
Right, yeah. You still want like, and obviously you're in red and green, so you're going to play 1-drops, but like the thought of Ranger Captain might come up. What you have to know pretty quickly, what are your Ranger Captain targets right away? Do I get Orcish Lumberjack here, or do I get a Ragavan? You play Ragavan still?
Yeah, Tinderwall's also like a good one.
Oh,
'cause that's
Tinderwall's
also
great.
just like a little more ramp.
Yeah, exactly. So like you have to be able to like know your targets. What's your intuition pile? You probably know that you have an intuition pile that probably includes
Eternal Witness, Noxious Revival, and Food Chain.
There you go. Yeah. So you're like ready to go as an Etali player. That's part of like the things that you'll learn as you play Etali.
Yeah, the fun of like knowing how far do I go into an ad nauseum when I flip into ad nauseum or something like that.
Ad nauseum is great for you, right? Even if you do flip high cards.
If I flip a
anything's
Harrigast and a land, I'm happy.
Yeah,
like,
that's
all
true.
right, there we go.
Although, honestly, we were talking recently, maybe you were cutting Harry Gas, though.
I guess I'd be really sad. Whatever I put in for Harrigast, though, if it's Formidable Speaker and a land, I'm exceptionally happy.
Yeah.
Oh my
that's the
god.
same
Yeah.
thing.
What's this? Rionia all of a sudden? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Rogsai, I should talk a little bit more about how it wins, just if we're talking about each of the decks. We were going through Rogsai.
Because we're talking about Turbo in general. We should talk
Turbo
about
in
this,
general.
yeah.
The Rogsai, I feel like, also represents a lot of other decks that are trying to do something similar, which is mainly Necropotence and Ad Nauseam as early as possible, ideally on turn 1, maybe on turn 2. And then if you're going the Necropotence, Necrodominance line, winning in the end step with the Born Upon the Wind or Valley Floodcaller before you have to discard all of those cards, or with the Final Fortune effect to take an extra turn and use the cards quickly before your opponents get to do shit. That's like the main plan of the deck. You can also backdoor into turn 1 Rhystic Study if you've mulligan low, or try to do something with Mystic Amor, the card advantage, and you have like the wheels as well to not really disrupt, that's not really the goal, but like as ways to like soft push and nudge and still gain advantage if you can make a lot of mana with those wheels as you're going.
We really more care about the fast ways to win today, though, which is Ad Nauseam and Necropotence on turn 1 or turn 2.
Ideally turn 1, but like if, turn 2, sometimes it can be okay.
The Necro push on turn 2 after you get it out on turn 1 is also fair.
Exactly, yeah. And then where you go from there is normally you finish on Underworld Breach. Really, you finish on a Thassa's Oracle with an empty library. That's where you finish.
Yeah.
But you can either do that with like Demonic Consultation or a Tainted Pact, or with Underworld Breach and Brain Freeze and Lion's Eye Diamond, which is weirdly easier somehow. I don't know how you a 3-card combo, but truly just
Underworld Breach is one card. Is the thing.
And Underworld Breach costs 1 and a red. It's very easy to cast. And then if you've done anything else, you can just like find the rest of it with Underworld Breach.
Yeah. If you have Lion's Eye Diamond, then everything is okay.
Yeah.
If you have Lotus Petal, everything is probably fine.
Realistically, you need a tutor and cards. If you have Demonic
Yeah.
Tutor, you can win the game just off of Demonic Tutor if you have enough mana and enough cards in the graveyard by finding Underworld Breach and then, escaping the Demonic Tutor to find Brain Freeze, escaping to find the Lion's Eye Diamond, whatever you need.
We talked a lot about this recently on the show too.
So that's the main way to win. And then normally also you have like Mnemonic Betrayal to take a win con out of your opponent's graveyards, or Praetor's Grasp to take it out of their deck.
A lot of backup ways to go.
A lot of backup ways to get somebody else's Thassa's Oracle.
Although I feel like a lot of times what you do with them is they're like tutors for after you've ad-naused on turn 2, and then like this is how I find an Underworld Breach.
I'm going to find your Underworld Breach with my Praetor's Grasp.
I feel 90% of the time that's how you use them instead.
Yeah,
but
that's how the Rogside deck wins. I normally wins on, I think, turn 2, turn 3. It's not the fastest turbo deck. I wouldn't classify it as the fastest one because you do play counter magic and stuff. You do have slots for that. So realistically, I think it's pretty common to like kind of win on in that turn 2, turn 3 range, which is still very fast. But
I think Etali is just slightly faster because normally with Etali, like your push on turn 2, I think is a little bit more, I don't want to say guaranteed, but like I feel like there's a lot of things that like in Rogside that let you want to wait for the turn 3 win because you can like add Naws at instant speed, or you didn't get Necro out until turn 2 because you had to do a little setup on turn 1.
Right, yeah. Like I wouldn't be doing a turn 1 Hexing Squelcher, turn 2 Necropotence to win on turn 3. That could be something that you would do.
Whereas like in Etali, it's like, no, if I'm casting Etali, my window's right now. Like if I'm getting another Etali clone, that means my window's right now, and I'm keeping to go right now.
Right, yeah.
I don't have the option to protect myself later. I don't have the option for a turn 1 Mystic Remora to build up a bunch of resources and then win with them then, right?
Right,
So like I have to just kind of go for it before all of my other opponents make those plays. And you play against Rogsai and they play Mystic Remora and you go, I don't care, that's fine. You're going to spin me into only good cards and you're not going to play as much interaction as the mid-range range decks that are in the format then too.
That's true.
So with Etali, the way that you win is you just keep spinning into Etalis in your opponent's decks until you find a tutor for food chain.
Yeah.
And that makes it way easier to keep Etaliing until you find another tutor or another way to find squeeze, so you can make infinite mana with food chain, cast Etali infinitely. And then the way that you win is that Etali...
Your opponents concede is the way that you
your
win.
opponents concede, yeah. But Etali doesn't mill. Etali exiles all of the cards that you go past too. A lot of people go, oh, they mill, they go to the bottom. No, they don't go to the bottom.
Yeah, all those lands are on the way. Those are gone too.
They're all gone. Yeah, you will have no more draws for turn that are actual cards. So they all go to exile. And then if something happens and your opponents are like, well, I have Born Upon Loon in my hand, you can't just pass a turn. You go, oh, okay.
Yeah, then you gotta wait an hour while I cast all of the spells out of all of your decks.
Exactly, yeah. So you get
one at a time,
You get to cast everyone's spells, and eventually, like, you find Burgie, you find Lightning Bolt, and you find Eternal Witness, so that, what is it? Every time you cast Lightning Bolt, you make another red. You Eternal Witness it back somehow. How do you get it back? With Eternal Witness?
I don't know.
Do you think? Through Twin Flame, actually.
Oh, through Twin Flame.
Yeah, because you've made infinite mana
for food chain.
For food chain with
Etali.
Squee at this point, which means that every time you cast Squee, you make a Burgie red mana that you can use for anything.
Ah, there it is.
And then that way, whenever you Twin Flame and strive the Twin Flame to copy Eternal Witness and something else, you can get Twin Flame back from your graveyard to your hand.
With the Eternal Witness copy that it
With
makes.
the Eternal Witness copy, as well as the Lightning Bolt then too.
Nice.
So now you can use your infinite Burgie mana that you have in order to loop Strived Twin Flames and Lightning Bolt on Eternal Witness to take out the table with damage that way.
Normally, you don't have to explain that book to people because they know they're just dead. But there is a definitive way that you don't have to just pass a turn. You can just kill them right now if you want to.
You can do this, yeah. And there's also things that you'll do. You'll be like, oh, well, I had to use Harnfell, Horn of Bounty, to get me to this point.
Yeah.
That's fine. You'll flip into a Chain of Vapor. It's okay.
Yeah, bounce spell will come eventually. Yeah.
Exactly.
Other people play Burgie too.
Exactly, yeah. You already have infinite mana, so you'll be able to get Burgie back into play easily.
We know a lot about how these turbo decks win because we play them.
Yes.
The other turbo decks on this list we will know less about, but we will know broadly what they do.
We'll know more about. I'm going to get into a lot of these too, because I think when we talked about the 5 best decks in cEDH, Rograkh was one of them.
Yeah.
And Etali would have been the 6th deck that we talked about in that episode, if I'm being real.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me not to kick Sisay out of the top 5 and biasly throw Etali in there.
Sisay sucks. That's okay.
No, Sisay is great. Sisay is an awesome deck, but so are these other decks that I want to like see if they fall in here. These are decks that like you might still see at tournaments. Some are a little bit more prominent than others, but some of them you might just not run into for a couple months until the format actually like kicks into gear a little bit more. But the other main one that I think you'll see mostly is Ral Monsoon Mage, which we already mentioned a little bit more. This is Goblin Electromancer in the command zone. Makes all of your instants and sorceries cost 1 less, and if you flip heads on them, you can flip them into a Planeswalker.
You can, but you don't have to, which is weirdly relevant.
Which is very relevant, yeah. And the Planeswalker version of him can plus up and do the same thing that he does, but what you're really trying to do is cast 6 instants or sorceries in the same turn, so that when you land your Ral flip, he'll flip over and be able to ultimate right away to sacrifice himself, put him back in the command zone, so that you'll have enough mana for a 4-mana Ral and be able to keep going off through like other loops then too.
Yeah, the play pattern that I see often with this deck, like the dream situation, is like a turn 1 Ral, turn 2, cast 6 spells, flip Ral, do the thing, recast Ral, cast 6 more spells from the first ones that you got, reflip Ral, cast 6 spells, flip Ral, do the thing, recast Ral, cast 6 more spells from the first ones that you got, reflip Ral, cast 6 spells, flip Ral, do the thing, recast Ral, cast 6 more spells from the first ones that you got, reflip Ral, and by this time everyone is exhausted and is ready to scoop. And eventually they find some sort of win on turn 2. I guess they could win on turn 3. Like that would be also very expected. But I feel like when I see Ral do scary stuff, it's turn 1 Ral, turn 2, do all this shit, right?
This falls into the same plane with Etali, where like you can really reliably win on turn 2, but there's sometimes where you do fizzle out because you didn't get the flips that you need. And your Ral flips are exile the top 2 cards of your library, you can play them this turn.
Yeah.
So there are times where you fizzle out, but you get to a point where you're just like so far ahead on cards and advantage, and like you've spun into a bunch of free removal to blow up all of the things that everyone else did on turn 1, that like you can pass the turn and win on turn 3 and almost guarantee that your opponents can't actually do anything to stop you from going off on that next turn.
It doesn't have like an exact win line. I mean, like it does, but its early attempts at winning the game very much feel like a Storm deck. You're like you said, you're casting a lot of spells that just like exile the top 2 cards of your library and see if they're good. And a lot of times they're good because you don't play a lot of lands and you play a lot of cards that do the same thing. Everything is a ritual or it exiles 2 more cards or something like that, right?
I hope I find light up the stage.
Right, yeah. But there are situations where the deck can kind kind of get unlucky and there's not much you can do. I think that's a little bit of a political advantage because you can explain Etali is the same way. You can convince your opponents that you're like, hey, this isn't a win. It's 2 cards.
Yeah,
Etali,
wait for my Underworld Breach or
Yeah,
my thing that copies every spell that I cast.
Sure.
I forget the name of that card, but there's spells that are like that in that deck.
Tell your opponents, well, this isn't a win, so you should just wait and let it happen and then counter what comes next. Dream situation is that they do that, and then what comes next is, well, now there's 2 spells that you revealed, and both of them are good, and your opponent can only counter one of them, and you get the other.
Do you want to counter the Past in Flames or the Underworld Breach?
Right, yeah.
Which one of these do you care about
realistically, I'm outing turbo players, but if a turbo player says that, you should probably just, I don't know, but it's tough though, because they do whiff sometimes, but you should probably just counter the thing that they're doing.
Yeah, do you know what will guarantee them to whiff is like stop them right in their tracks right now. Yeah,
exactly. And I feel like when I'm playing Rograkh, it is for some reason I can't convince people of that. It's just a necropotence. I'm just gonna draw 5 cards right now. They say, I don't care, I'm countering it. Ral feels a little bit more random somehow.
It's getting harder and harder to convince people that an Etali's okay to resolve, though. I will say that.
It's not okay to resolve.
It's a very good thing to resolve.
And it's important, I missed this the other day, it's important to make sure you counter the thing that can cast Etali. If they play a ritual, if they play the Seething Song, counter the Seething Song, because you're not gonna be able to counter the Etali because your Swan Song doesn't counter it. So like, if you have a way to counter early, I say this also, like, it's okay to counter the Dark Ritual. Like against a Rograkh side, it can make sense if you have Dispel and they have a Dark Ritual on the stack, they may be casting Necropotence, which your Dispel can't hit, so it might be relevant to hit that.
Oh yeah, I was
gonna
potted with Tyler the other night, and his Dark Ritual got mental misstepped, and it was absolutely devastating for him. So I think a lot of times, like, stopping them early in their tracks when, like, they can still have that Necropotence in their hand, but if you don't have a way to stop the Necropotence, like, stopping them before they can get there can buy you just enough time to make sure that you can still, like, not be afraid of that at that point.
Realistically, though, the caveat, of course, we've talked about this before, is interacting with your opponents is bad.
It's bad. Don't do it. Win the game instead.
If you want to stop them, this can be a way to stop them. That might not necessarily mean you will win that game, which is tough. It makes sense that you should try to stop the player from winning. But
you can't stop them after Necro has resolved.
Yeah, exactly. But realistically, what you need to stop them, the best thing is to convince your opponent to stop them. If you can convince an opponent to use their interaction instead, that's the best thing that you can do. And the second best thing you can do is like have a Mystic Remora or a Mystic Study or a draw engine in play while you also have the ability to hold up free interaction to stop them. This way that even though you are down a card, you potentially still gained cards from them because they're a turbo deck and they fed your draw engine on the way. So you're not down as many resources as they are. That would put you in an okay situation to win that game.
So that way you can like hopefully draw interaction to stop what they're doing eventually. And then that way by the time you get to your turn, you're looking at 13 cards in your hand and you're like,
you have the ability to win.
Yeah.
Realistically, that's how you beat the turbo decks, is not just counter their shit, because that doesn't really help you win the game, I found. It just stops both of you from winning the game.
Yeah.
But establishing card advantage and having the interaction, that's how you beat the turbo deck. That's just, you need to be aware. You have to have 2 things, and those 2 things can be hard to find because turbo decks are meant to win on turn 2. That's what they're meant to do. cEDH decks are not often meant to stop a turn 2 win. Like, that's not their goal. Their goal is to win on turn 3 or 4.
Yeah.
That's what their goal is.
Especially with how they are like in the meta right now, because like a lot of decks aren't built to like always worry about a turn 2 win. Like they play some amount of interaction, but Sisay doesn't play like enough interaction to stop every single, like if one turn 2 win goes on the stack, they're not going to stop another turn 2 win.
To me, when looking at it, it feels better to just like, I want to be the one that wins fast, because
just wins fast.
I don't want to worry about my opponents. I just want to, if I can consistently win on turn 2, you're going to have interaction half the time. The other half you won't, and I'll win those games.
Or just make sure that you're mulliganing better, which is a thing that weirdly Ral can't do very well. I think a lot of turbo decks, like the strength of a good turbo deck is that you don't need a ton in your hand. You need mana and then the thing to do to win early, which could be Necropotence or a tutor to find Necropotence, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times, like a deck like Ral just needs a mass amount of cards in order to be able to go, right? You need to cast Ral, and then on the next turn, you need to cast 6 fucking spells.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, you're not going to do anything.
And realistically, I would imagine Ral is also another turbo deck that really takes advantage of turn 1 Mystic or Ristic instead. Draw a bunch of cards first, and then on turn 2, cast Ral and a bunch of spells all at once. That would probably be like the dream situation.
Yeah, if you can do all of that in one go, then it's way better, because you don't have to worry about like a removal spell hitting Ral at that point then too. So yeah, like a turn 2 Ral into Rite of Flame into spinning into a bunch of stuff and all in the same turn then is insane.
Yeah, whereas I feel like Rograkh, one of the strengths of Rograkh is that it actually, I think it mulligans pretty well. And now when I say well, sometimes you have to go to 3 or 2 and it's ridiculous.
Same thing with Etali though too, yeah.
But like you do have options of like land, Dark Ritual, Necropotence. That's 3 cards, and that's the best hand that you could have. You know what I mean? Like, so like there are options that you can be rewarded for going to 3 and 4, and 2 is tough. You know what I mean? But like
land, Mana Vault, Treasonous Ogre, I would keep that hand all of the time. Yeah,
there are 3s that are still very very good in some of the best turbo decks, I think. Although Ral still has like options for a very good, 3.
Oh yeah,
sure,
if you keep like land Mystic Remora, I think that's still a fine 3 in the hopes that like you get fed a ton. But that hand has no other spells to cast after Ral, so like you still really have to hope that you're able to go somewhere and you get fed a lot. So it's still, I think, a deck that's harder to mulligan in quite a bit.
Do we have any other turbo decks that you want to talk about?
Crick is also on my list here, which is a deck that I feel like we don't really see, which is a shame because I think it really is like one of the fastest decks in the format.
Yeah.
Crick and then like Ral Etali and then like Rograkh probably.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Crick, I think, suffers. The main thing that it suffers from is that its wins are very easy to stop. Not only does a counterspell stop most of them, but like, I don't know, Hoarding
a slight breeze.
A slight breeze can stop them. That is also similar to the case for like Rograkh, but Rograkh also has Thassa's Oracle, which is a little bit tricky, and then also can resolve an Underworld Breach, which is a little bit tricky, whereas like Crick has to resolve like a whole bunch of tutors, a whole bunch of spells. You're feeding everyone on anything. There's no situation where like you get to resolve a Jessica's Will copied, and then all of a sudden someone had interaction, but now their interaction is no good. Like those situations don't really happen with Crick because everything, to me, when I see it play out, is so on the table. Like Etali, we can do that shit where you convince. Who knows? Maybe the top 4 cards. You don't know. You know what I mean? Crick has a tutor and a whole bunch of mana. That's it.
I know you're getting the 1 mana thing that lets you pay a life to make a mana. I know what you're doing.
There's only so much, and I think that like that limitation is kind of, it makes it easy to fuck with Crick.
Because there's so many points that it needs to win the game in order to interact with it too. Like a lot of these other turbo decks, you can go, if I have a counterspell, I can stop you, but if I don't have that counterspell, like I'm gonna have a hard time.
A situation like that came up recently. I played a Celeste deck on the channel, and I did a Hoarding Broodlord line, and I tried to entomb and reanimate Hoarding Broodlord on turn 2, and someone had a misdirection for the Saw in Half on the Hoarding Broodlord, and Saw in Half their own 2 elves instead.
Oh yeah.
And that was a turn 2 win, and it's unlikely that people have interaction on turn 2 a lot of the times. Misdirection normally would not have been interaction for what Rograkh is doing, the Necropotence, or the interaction for the Ad Nauseam.
Well, I can stop one brainstorm.
Right, yeah. It wouldn't do anything there, whereas the Hoarding Broodlord line is easier to interact with because Misdirection is suddenly, for some reason, turned on against it. And I think that's a big part of what makes the turbo decks better, is the ones that are like, that can win quickly, but can win quickly in like difficult to interact with ways, or ways that are like really hard to see fully how they play out.
A roller coaster that has more moving parts is going to break down more frequently than a coaster that doesn't have as many moving parts. Like a flying coaster, like you go to Six Flags and you see the Supermen, and like you get in the thing and then they have to move you to the flying face down position. Like a regular roller coaster that you just get in a car and sit down, and there's no mechanical hydraulics that make you move the train at all. Like
less to break.
Exactly. There's way less things to break.
It's just gonna be more consistent.
It's gonna move quicker then too, because there's less things, less knobs that you have to turn at the same time for safety purposes as well.
I think I'm understanding your metaphor.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I could only think about roller coasters while you were talking. So
has it been a long time since you've been on a roller coaster, since it's winter?
It has, yeah. I think the last one that I was on, I went to Dorney before the end of the season with Courtney.
Okay.
So I think we did like a couple rides on Steel Force, but
that was it.
That was it. That would have been like September or something like that.
September. Any other turbo decks? What other turbo decks you want to talk about?
Do you think that Tymna Dargo is a turbo deck?
Kind of. We just had an episode on the Chill to Win, our patron thing, where Tyler won on turn 2 off of a sacrifice into Peer into the Abyss off of Dargo on turn 2.
Okay, but like Kinnan can Basalt Monolithing Kinnan on turn 2 and win, and I don't think Kinnan's a turbo deck.
Yeah, I think it has to do with intent. I think most decks could win on turn 2 or 1, but they're not going to. I think there's got to be a threshold of like how often that the deck actually can and is right for it to push there. So I don't know. Tymna Dargo is another one that's like similar to Blue Farm in my eyes, where like it could be if you wanted to build it all in on the turbo mode, but realistically it has such a solid backup plan of the Professional Facebreaker and Delny and Tymna, and it has such like a solid mid-range plan and so many silence effects. Even now it has now Grand Abolisher, and it has Voice of Victory and Silence and Hexing Squelcher and all of these things.
Hope of Gear per 2 they play.
It's got so many ways to have like a protected turn 3 or turn 4 win that like it kind of does make sense sometimes in that deck to wait a little bit. Like just because you can go for a turn 2, it might make more sense for that deck to wait until turn 3, and then you can put 2 silences on the stack, and then your opponents have a harder time interacting with you.
Well, it's just hard because like you can't stop other win conditions in that deck so much. Like when you look at those lists, they play like maybe 6 pieces of interaction, and one of them's a silence that like they are really hoping that they can have on their turn, and the other one's a Ranger Captain of Eos that they're also really hoping they can have for their turn.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of interaction. Yeah, so that in that way they kind of can't afford to let the game go too long. But with certain effects effects like Mayhem Devil, they can control the table a little bit. With Orcish Bowmaster,
That's true,
they can help control the table a little bit and buy themselves
fall
time.
behind. They might not be able to stop a lot of wins, but they can make sure that they're never falling behind at least. Yeah.
So I don't know if it would be considered a turbo deck. I mean, it's hard, dude. The what is a turbo deck is pretty gray. I would overall say no. If you're asking my gut reaction, I see the deck more often win on turn 4 in a protected way than earlier than that, but it's aggressive. Like, it does have the potential to win quickly.
It's more like an aggressive mid-range deck, I would say. Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I would have to look at some more data to like be able to like know for sure, I guess. But my gut, I play against Tyler mostly playing this deck, and Tyler,
and his play style, I think you're gonna say.
Yeah, he kind of admits that he doesn't really play it like a turbo deck because he just feels more comfortable playing it like a mid-range deck.
He would rather play it like Kinning, because I think he'd rather be playing Kinning.
Yeah, and I think for that reason, that means that it's not a turbo deck, because like, now you could build Rograkh to be a completely different deck. Wrongsai is a deck that exists, but Rograkh as it stands, I don't think you can really often play it like a mid-range deck. You'll just win less games. That's just like, it benefits so much from trying to win early. Etali is the same thing. Like, you could try to play Etali like a mid-range deck, but it wouldn't work out. You'd find quickly that like, if you're red blasting shit and just trying to be reactive, like, you wouldn't win those games.
If you spend more time building out like Panharmonicon effects, all you're gonna do is make people even more scared for when you eventually cast your Etali, and then you have all these great things in play, but you never get to do the one thing that you've been building up to do.
Right, exactly. Whereas like the Mardu decks, I think they do benefit, especially the ones that can acquire card advantage and mana advantage as the game progresses, because you have so many silence effects and you do have so many ways to push through with Hexing, Squelcher, and whatever to push through wins in the turn 4, turn 5 area, whereas the other turbo decks don't have those same resources. They're not playing those same white cards that allow you to push through wins a lot easier. So I don't think I would consider it a turbo deck for that reason, because its goal isn't to go fast. It just can go fast.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know if Rogsai's goal is to go fast. Rogsai's goal is to win as many games as quickly. You'll just win more games if you try to go quickly with Rograkh.
I think what's important, and something that we've talked about a lot before, is like making sure that your deck, like even if you are a turbo deck, you still want to make sure that you can win on turn 6 or turn 7 or turn 9 if you need to, right? Like, you don't want to be this all-in strategy that goes, well, my deck is exiled on turn 2 and now I can't win the game ever after that. Right? I don't want to make it sound like you can't ever win on turn 9, but like, you just have to look for windows a little bit more. Like, what makes Rograkh good as a deck that can win later in the game, and why it's probably one of like the best turbo decks, is because it can play Born Upon the Wind and Final Fortune in ways to like sneak in windows in these mid-range games where like after a huge counter war goes off, you can just win. Whereas like in Etali, I don't really have that luxury. Like, I could play Emergent Zone and then what? Crop rotation for it at some point? That's bad. But like, at the same time, there's a lot of times where you just go, if I just draw like Jessica's Will, that makes me enough mana, I can cast Etali again and go back in the game, right? So like, you still want to make sure that you have enough gas to go later. So I don't want to make it seem like just because you can win later doesn't mean that you're not a turbo deck.
Right, yeah. I had a game recently, you're talking about winning later in Rograkh, where at locals, I played Hexing Squelcher on turn 1, and I played Mystic Remora on turn 2, and it didn't draw me any cards. Everyone was really good, and they just didn't feed me any cards. And then on turn 5, I won the game with Hexing Squelcher in play, and my opponents revealed to me 5 counter spells in their hands. And I had the Hexing Squelcher, and they didn't have removal, and it felt incredible. So like, yes, there are ways to do it. Hexing Squelcher, I think, is one of the tools that allows you to win in the late game, because people just don't play that much removal, which they shouldn't, because removal is bad, but Hexing Squelcher is really good.
That's the thing. I mean, they might now, though. Like, that is something. Like, Squelcher might be something that makes people play some more like hard removal in their deck, but like, that's also kind of fine at the same time. Now they have to have 2 resources.
Right.
Now they're cutting another good card from their deck so that they can play what? Cyclonic Rift again or something like that. That's for slow metas.
Yeah, that's true. And they're not going to be able to have that up. Like, if you're trying to win on turn 2, that means like half the time.
Did nothing then.
Yeah, that means like half the time your opponent is only going to have not 2 mana in play, right? If you're on turn 2, you've gone before 2 other people have had turn 2 sometimes. So like, they're just not going to have Cyclonic Rift available a lot of the times.
Yeah, they'd rather play Lotho 100% of the time, I think. Tymna Dargo, so you don't think it's a turbo deck?
I don't think so.
When I evaluate it at the table, I'm always expecting that it can go fast.
Yeah.
I have a hard time looking at it and thinking of it as a mid-range deck, but I think that's just because like the combo aspect of Dargo is really what overpowers my brain when I'm thinking about what the deck is going to do against me. And I think that for this episode, we're trying to get away from combo, because everything is a combo.
Everything's combo,
So I think what ends up overpowering my brain then is I go, okay, well, they can combo quickly. I know that like they can go pretty fast because we can get Dargo out quickly, but they just like need a lot of pieces. They're another flying coaster that like has a lot of mechanical parts.
I'm not super locked in on this thought that Tymna Dargo is not a turbo deck, because they could very
We're allowed to think differently about it too.
I'm not really positive on that. Just my gut tells me it's not one of the 3 or 4 fastest decks in the format. And
No.
so I don't know. I have like I think that's where the turbo lines, because then at a certain point, like any deck can win on turn 1 or turn 2. Like how often are you doing it? So maybe I don't know.
If we're trying to keep like the average turn win in mind for these decks, I feel like it's slower than Rograkh then still. Yeah.
What other turbo decks are there in the format?
So Vivi's not a turbo deck, right? Because Vivi needs Vivi out, and then you can like push consistently on turn 3.
If turn 3 is your sweet spot, I would say, yeah, still not a turbo deck. So I would say Vivi's maybe not a turbo deck. And just the format is fast. I think a lot of decks can win early, but I think, not a turbo deck.
What did I put anything else down for turbo?
We talked a little bit about Lumra, but Lumra also kind of wins on like turn 3 or 4 sometimes.
I can't figure out how to win with Lumra on turn 3.
Yeah.
Every time that I find a way to cast Lumra early, I don't have any other pieces to go with Lumra and put something together. Or I have like Tireless Provisioner and like, yeah, sure, the treasures are helpful, but it's not actually helpful because something else is fucked up. My lands come into play tapped and still. So like I don't know. I have a hard time winning before turn 4 with that deck, and it doesn't have protection really.
Right. It's just difficult to interact with, I think. It falls in a similar category as Sisay does, I think, of like combo, which is like, we know everything is combo, but like Sisay is it's like specific. Sisay is like Magda, is like Lumra, that it's like, it's kind of doing its own thing.
But Magda and Sisay have ways to still interact with the table.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, I put Force of Vigor in my deck and I put Endurance in my deck. And I'm like, how often do you have them? When you mulled to 5, they're not options for you in Lumra. You had to keep Spelunking and Zuranorb.
Right.
And now you can't even cast Lumra with that hand.
That's also the thing with Rograkh a lot of times, is that if I have Mulligan, I don't have interaction in my hand. I'm telling you. Because if I have Mulligan, if I have to go to 5, the cards that I'm putting at the bottom are probably the counter spells, because I need like the gas and the mana to do something.
That's the thing. 7s feel luxurious in a lot of these turbo decks that aren't Ral Monsoon Mage. Like a lot of them are just like, oh great, now I can be a little bit more protected, or I have a better chance of being more protected.
And I think that's so fun. Like that's the best part about playing turbo, is like your god hands win on turn 1. Like that, your god hands are so good. Whereas like a lot of other decks, like perfect hands, a turn 1 Rhystic Study or something, it's like a maybe win. It's like my great hands in Rograkh are I win the game on turn 1. Etali the same way. Your god hands are you win the game on turn 1. That's
Exactly. Like
the high ceiling.
The highest ceiling, which I think is kind of why I really like it. And it's a little bit more of like, this is the kind of style of play that was prominent when we got into playing cEDH a little bit. I mean, we still had like mid-range situations with like Flash where like nobody wanted to win and we were still...
But everyone could.
Like we all could have won on turn 2, but like we knew someone else was going to win on top of you instead. And just like, there still is some of that with Born Upon the Wind. It's not as prominent because you still need to resolve your Born Upon the Wind, unlike Flash, where you could have just like won with activated abilities after Flash resolved.
Once Flash resolved,
This is like Born Upon the Wind and something else, which means I still need 2 more mana for other things. I wanted to look at other decks that maybe I put down.
Asika. I play this card in Sisay and I never know how to pronounce it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, this is one of these like 5-color good stuff ad nauseum decks that you never want to use the Prismatic Bridge side of.
Yeah, I don't think you ever want to use any of the sides for. I think sometimes you will play Asika on turn 2 and then ad nauseum on turn 3, and that'll be good. And then other times you just don't play the commander at all.
Because you just ad naus on turn 2.
It's like a Terra deck. It's a 5-color, normally, ad nauseum, breach, necropotence, Thassa's Oracle, good stuff deck.
Exactly, yeah.
I would consider that one kind of turbo. I think that's like the main goal of that one, is to win quickly. It's another deck that from what I've seen, it doesn't actively try to win the fastest. It wants to hit second deck. It's like a blue farm. It's like a Terra. It's like one of these decks that doesn't necessarily want the heat of going first, but still wants to win quickly. It's like a Tymna Dargo.
Yeah, and it's playing its commander because it doesn't want the heat from everything else too, which means that like you're giving up on a lot of other value that a lot of even like other 5-color decks are able to take advantage of in the command zone. I think it is still like turbo skewed because of the way that it's built. Like if you're building a good stuff deck in cEDH, it skews turbo because all of the strongest effects are the turbo effects.
Yeah. From our perspective, I think, because we like the turbo cards.
Yeah, but like Badger Mole Cub.
Yeah.
Better or worse than Dark Ritual?
Oh, worse. But it's still very powerful. But like,
still very powerful, but
like
worse.
Over the course of the game, realistically, probably makes more mana. But it costs more mana, and it needs more setup, and it needs more other things to go with it.
But that's more chances to interact with it. Like Dark Ritual, if you didn't do something about it while it was on the stack, I have the 3 mana, and now there's nothing else that you can do.
That's very true.
Whereas, like, I could make 16 mana with my Badger Mole Cub, but I could make 2 mana with my Badger Mole Cub. And Dark Ritual always makes you 2.
That's true, but Badgermole has looked insane every time I see it recently. That card
Yeah.
seems so powerful, especially in Kinnan, where like they already always wanted to tutor for Enduring Vitality.
Yeah, and now
they,
making sure that all of your stuff taps for 3 mana with your creatures.
Yeah, now they have like another option that's like 2 mana instead if they want to. It's just like it's so perfect for everything that deck wants to do.
Yeah, it has been really nice. But like, okay, yeah, I play that versus like you play Dark Ritual, which pushes you into a win instead.
For me
and then
personally,
you can't use the mana.
and I play Sisay too. I play Badgermole
Yeah.
and Sisay, and I do like the decks that can have the option to go a little later. I prefer the play style of like winning quickly. I just think it's a little bit more fun. There's pros and cons because you do get to talk more as you play mid-range decks, and if you like the social element of Magic and you like the politicking, you like that aspect of it, you find that more in the mid-range decks for sure. In the turbo decks, there's just not enough room to talk. What are you gonna say? What are you gonna do?
Don't counter my win condition.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
really
That's all I do.
can
What do you
say.
mean? Yeah.
But again, like with the whole moving parts and flying roller coaster thing, like politicking is another way that you're opening up yourself to not having things go the way that you want something to go in the game. And that's honestly the most volatile aspect of a game too. Like Force of Will says the same words on it every single time.
Yeah.
But your opponent's personality is different every day.
Yeah.
Even though you and I play so much Magic together, what our decisions are going to be is going to be shaped by whatever happened to us last. And whatever like lesson we learned most recently, and whatever lessons we might have forgotten because of other lessons that we learned that are on the forefront of our brain.
Yeah.
Or maybe like you got a parking ticket and now you're having a bad day and you got like shit on by a bird at a Christmas market or something like that.
That one's getting specific.
Now, don't tell people that it's specific.
Don't ask questions.
So like there's a lot of things that end up going into that
People
like
and also people can lie. Like your opponents are allowed to lie. There's nowhere in the Magic rules that say people are not allowed to lie. They're allowed to lie. If
They're
they make
allowed
deals
to
with
lie,
you,
yeah.
They're allowed to. There's like this like stigma around lying in cEDH, but they are allowed to lie and they will in tournaments.
They will.
Dude, you got to put it in your pocket or something.
I'm done looking at it. It's just gonna stay on the floor. I'm done looking at
But
it.
people, especially in tournaments, outside of tournaments, I imagine it happens less likely, but some people still will. If you make a deal with someone, they are allowed to lie. That's part of it. And then you get to remember that forever and you get to tell everyone that this person's a liar and they don't get to get away with that as much with you. But like, it's something that can happen. And that is something to think about if you're politicking in the mid game. So like, it's just like you said, it's just another thing that can go wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Especially when like you're paired up against random people in tournaments all the time. You never know what's gonna go on. So just because one sentence worked for you in one scenario does not necessarily mean it's gonna work for you in another scenario.
So less sentences better. Less word do trick.
Less word
Want
do
to
trick.
see world.
Yeah. Want to see world. Thank Watch podcast.
Anything else we want to talk about for Turbo?
We said we were gonna rank these decks, so we didn't end up ranking any of them.
How do you want to do it? Because I have a ranking system in my mind.
What is the ranking system in your mind?
The almost Turbo, which is the honorable mention. And in this category, I will consider probably most of the ones we talked about today. Blue Farm, Tymna Dargo, Vivi, and there was one more. What was the other one? Not Lumra, not Sisay,
Esika, yeah.
Esika. Those ones I think are all almost turbo decks. I mean, there's so many fucking decks in the format. There's so many other fucking decks that we could have talked about. But we're talking about the ones that like show up the most in tournaments.
That's what we were specifically doing, yeah.
And then for me, it would be Ral, Etali, Rograkh in 3-2-1 order. Rograkh is the best turbo deck. Etali is the second best, and then Ral,
Monsoon Mage is the third best.
That's how I would classify the turbo decks because I think those are the 3 fastest decks in the format, and those are the ones that I see. And I don't mean like easily, but it feels to me like it is consistently reasonable for those decks to win on turn 2. Not an outlier, not a sometimes. They win on turn 2. That's their sweet spot. They win there most of the time. For me, that's those 3 decks, and all of the other decks can win on turn 2, but their sweet spot is like turn 3 or 4, and for some reason, my line is there between turn 2 and turn 3.
Exactly, yeah. And then Crick is another deck we talked about today.
Sorry, Crick fans, dog
Sorry.
shit.
Oh, you know what? Rocco. Where would you throw Rocco anywhere? Because I feel like...
Still a turn 3 deck, I feel.
Yeah, when I played Rocco, this feels hard to win on turn 1.
I think it's in that category of Lumra and Sisay and Magda of these decks win on turn 3, so still kind of quick, but the reason that they are okay is because they're difficult to interact with. So they can take a turn off and win later on turn 3.
You know what it really is? It's the difference between a fireworks deck and a balloon deck. The turn 3 decks are these balloon decks where they go set up on turn 1, set up on turn 2. And then all of a sudden, like, it pops on turn 3 because they did the setup and they got to the spot where they needed to be, and then the wind comes out of, let's spot where you went, oh, I saw that coming because of the stuff you were doing earlier.
Right, yeah.
Whereas Etali and Rograkh are fireworks decks. You shoot them up into the air by making a bunch of mana, and then they just completely explode after the one spell resolves, because you cast 4 more spells right away, and that makes you cast 4 more spells, or you just drew 100 more spells. I would even say Ral Monsoon Mage is also a fireworks deck.
Even though it is sort of like a balloon deck, but it's a very, very quick balloon. It blows up, all in one turn, so that is kind of fireworks.
Exactly. You can still go turn 1, fetch for a Surveil land and go, wow, what a fun slow hand. And then turn 2, go Lotus Petal, land, Ral, start to go off with the Rite of Flame and a bunch of other card draw effects from there. And then everything else, like Tymna Dargo, Tymna Kram, Magda, Asika, like all these other things that have to, Sisay, all these other decks that like have to go set up. These are balloon decks.
Where they get into, I think the balloon part of it is they get into a situation where it's hard for them to lose rather than one that it's easy for them to win. Maybe Kinnan didn't win the game on turn 3, but there's a Seedborn Muse and then there's a Consecrated Sphinx right away when they flip. So then on the turn 3 cycle, they all of a sudden are in this position where like they probably can't lose the game anymore, but they don't actually win the game yet. Their balloon is just getting bigger.
The actions that they took on turn 3 is what won them the game there. Like you can still pinpoint the thing that happened that turned it around. For them.
Which is a little bit, it's similar and different from Dargo. I feel like Dargo has a sim situation where like they can go for that turn 3 win, or they can put a Smothering Tithe and a Mayhem Devil into play along with
like a Lothos there and then a Ranger Captain Vios that attacked for 2 turns.
Right, yeah, exactly. So like they can be in similar situations where like they don't necessarily commit a win, they just make their balloon bigger and like make it harder to lose.
So it's really the fireworks decks these are the true turbo decks.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I have nothing else to say on this subject.
I'm really sad that there are, the last thing I would like to say is I'm really sad that there are, I guess, fewer turbo decks than I thought that there would be. There's 3. We landed on 3. We landed on Silas, we landed on Etali, and we landed on Ral Monsoon Mage.
I was going to say, we may be being too critical. There might be other ones that we're just not thinking about.
Yeah, maybe your criteria at home is like turn 3's fast.
Yeah.
I'm used to playing Thrasios Tymna, and I can't even find a combo until turn 8. Right? Like, so maybe what you think of turbo is, a little bit slower than what we're used to, but from the brains of turbo players who have been turbo players for 6 months, so we've been turbo players again now.
I've been on and off Rograkh forever, basically.
I mean, I guess I have with Etali too, but I don't know. I think we're a little bit more turbo pilled than I feel like still good portions of the formats a little bit. We are going to look at it a little bit more scrupulously for what is going to fall under like what's fast enough for us.
Yeah.
What's more successful for us? Winning with a Heuristic Study in play on my opponent's side of the field, or winning when they don't have a Heuristic Study?
When they don't.
When they don't. Huh.
You could also talk about like playing around shit and like how to like make yourself seem like not the threat. That's like a whole nother thing if we want to do the other day I was searching my library and I said, how do you guys feel about an Underworld Breach versus a Wheel of Fortune? And someone said, I don't know that I'd counter Wheel of Fortune. And I went, okay, let's go that direction.
Get the Wheel of Fortune.
There are things that you can do to like, Etali has this thing that we talked about a little bit of just like being able to tell your opponents that you don't know what you're going to flip into. But I feel like we already talked about that shit.
That's like a whole politics.
That's like a whole thing
right there. Yeah. And like telling people like, oh, well, only counter this thing because I'll go tutor this instead.
We'll talk about that in another one.
Turbo is, we just wanted to talk about it because this is what's going to be best in cEDH. Shut up, Cam.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so on Patreon like our $100 patrons.
Abyss AA, E4 Cards and More, Red, Finks MTG, Wandering Around, Mike H, Tom Bieber, Cumulative Upkeep MTG, Nathan Cohen, Mr. Derby, Okie Toad, Penguin Man 0089, Eli the Magic Guy, David Newman, Johnny Denver Omelet, Rocky Hall, Pat Fires, Frogman Spangler, Larceny Roars, Your Boy Blue, Sparky B, SC Phillip, Bowling Groupie, Zach Hartley, Big Legs Banjo, Reactive, Shaun of the Ice, The Works 472, Gerber Garrett, Mace the Ace, Luke Cook, Connor Sipon, Joshua Day, Demon of Rosgrease, Peter Stewart, Corner Wild, Uncle Butts, Doot Luke, Quadja A, Hamid, Scott Hawk, and Baby G-Bus.
If you'd like to pick up any of our merch, you can do that at playtowinmtg.com.
Thank you, Dragon Shift, for supporting the show. Use code PlayToWin5 at our affiliate link down below for 5% off.
If you want to follow us on social media, you can.
Thank you for watching.
See you next time.
Bob Russell, Devin Morrow, Ruby Supreme, Willow 2998, Turtle 99, Exo, Sarge MTG, Rick, Shardicus, McSaucy, Max McCumber, Meta, Ben Finelli, Jason Brooks, Safarius, Ono Frog, Vietnam 69, Sarcastic, Mystic Muffin Man, Zachary Coulson, Dalton Poteet, Young Wildfang, Thomas Bueno, and David Nelson.
Ta-ta!
So long!
Hi, Jack. Look at that belly. He's taking it out. Keep it in there.